6 words. That's all it took to flip the entire league on its head. Not a press conference meltdown. Not a public feud. Not some explosive interview. Just 6 calm, calculated words dropped into an Instagram comment section like a perfectly timed 3 at the buzzer. And suddenly, everyone was watching. Because this wasn't just about a joke. It wasn't just about All-Star Weekend. And it definitely wasn't just about 2 players going back and forth. This was about power. About influence. About who really controls the narrative in women's basketball right now. The moment didn't look dramatic at first. There was no shouting, no headline screaming scandal. But if you understand how professional sports really work, how branding, sponsorships, and perception quietly shape everything, you knew instantly that something bigger had just happened. Caitlin Clark didn't raise her voice. She didn't defend herself. She didn't even explain. She just typed 6 words, and let the world connect the dots. That's what made it dangerous. Because when someone with real leverage speaks lightly, it hits heavier. And the timing? That wasn't accidental. To understand why those 6 words carried so much weight, you have to go back to a weekend that was supposed to be about unity. A packed arena. Nearly 17,000 fans. Flashing cameras. The WNBA celebrating one of the biggest all-star events in its history. Energy high. Momentum rising. The league finally feeling the kind of national attention players had been fighting for. On the surface, everything looked perfect. But underneath that celebration, tension was already building. And one comment in a press room was about to light the match. All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis wasn't just another league event. It felt different from the start. The arena was full, not just good turnout, full, but loud, buzzing, record-setting full. Gainbridge Fieldhouse was packed with nearly 17,000 fans, and it wasn't just die-hard supporters. There were celebrities courtside. National media outlets covering it like it was a playoff game. Casual sports fans tuning in just to see what the noise was about. For years, the WNBA had fought for this kind of spotlight. Players had pushed for visibility, fair pay, better travel, better facilities. They'd carried the league on their backs through seasons where games aired on secondary channels and marketing budgets barely existed. Now the cameras were finally there. And so was leverage. Before the game even tipped off, the players made a coordinated statement. During warm-ups, they walked onto the court wearing black shirts that read, "Pay us what you owe us." It wasn't subtle. It wasn't playful. It was organized. The collective bargaining agreement was set to expire in October, and tensions were already rising. Compared to their NBA counterparts who receive around 50% of league revenue, WNBA players reportedly receive roughly 9%. Many still play overseas in the off-season just to secure financial stability. This wasn't just symbolic activism. This was business. The message was unified, serious, strategic, and for a moment, it worked. The conversation was exactly where the players wanted it, focused on revenue share, growth, fairness, the future of the league. But press conferences can be unpredictable. All it takes is one sentence to redirect the narrative. And that's exactly what happened when Kelsey Plum sat down next to Sabrina Ionescu in front of a room full of reporters. She was asked about the coordinated protest. And instead of keeping the focus on labor negotiations, she made a comment that nobody saw coming. She said, almost casually, that 0 members of Team Clark were present at the players' meeting earlier that day. She even added, "Not to tattletale." The room shifted. You could feel it. Sabrina's reaction said more than the words did. A visible eye roll. A quick, sarcastic response that really needed to be mentioned. In that split second, the tone changed. What was supposed to be about collective unity suddenly felt personal. Because everyone knew what that implied. Caitlin Clark wasn't there. And now people were asking why. Here's the part that got buried under the noise. Caitlin Clark wasn't absent because she didn't care. She wasn't skipping meetings. She wasn't distancing herself from the movement. She wasn't sitting somewhere ignoring the moment. She was injured. A groin issue that had been bothering her since mid-July had sidelined her from all-star activities. The Indiana fever had already ruled her out. She was recovering, resting, trying to protect her body in the middle of a long professional season that's far more physical than college ever was. That context matters. But in the age of clipped soundbites and viral posts, context doesn't travel as fast as controversy. The moment Plum made that comment, the narrative forked in two directions. One side framed it as harmless locker room humor. The other saw it as a subtle jab at the league's most visible star. And that's where things got complicated. Because Clark isn't just another rookie. She arrived in the WNBA with more attention than any player in league history. Her college career shattered scoring records. Her games at Iowa drew viewership numbers that rivaled major men's sporting events. She walked into the professional league with national endorsement deals already lined up and arenas adjusting seating capacity when she came to town. That kind of spotlight doesn't go unnoticed. It shifts gravity. When Clark plays, ticket prices surge. Television ratings spike. Road games sell out in cities that historically struggled with attendance. Merchandise with her name moves faster than supply chains can restock. Whether people want to admit it or not, her presence has altered the economic trajectory of the league. And when someone like that becomes the center of even a subtle criticism, it doesn't stay small. The internet didn't treat Plum's comment like a throwaway joke. It treated it like a declaration. Social media threads exploded within hours. Clips of the press conference circulated everywhere. Analysts debated whether it was jealousy, frustration, or just poor timing. Fans dissected every facial expression, every pause, every tone shift. And suddenly, what was meant to spotlight collective bargaining became a debate about Caitlin Clark versus the veterans. That's the risk when a league is in transition. When one player's arrival accelerates growth faster than the ecosystem is emotionally prepared for. Some veterans have spent years grinding without national recognition. Long road trips, overseas contracts, playoff runs that barely made mainstream headlines. They built the foundation brick by brick. Then Clark enters, and the spotlight tilts. It's not personal, but it feels personal. And in professional sports, perception is everything. But here's what made this situation different. Clark didn't say a word. No response. No statement. No clarification. She let the storm swirl without stepping into it. And sometimes, silence is louder than defense. Silence can look like weakness to people who don't understand leverage. But in this case, it was the opposite. While sports talk shows filled segments debating rookie privilege and social media turned into a courtroom, Caitlin Clark stayed completely still. No vague subtweets. No interviews hinting at frustration. No passive-aggressive captions. Just recovery updates and game prep behind the scenes. That kind of restraint isn't accidental. Because when you're the most talked about athlete in the league, you don't need to defend yourself. The conversation defends you. And that's exactly what happened. Analysts began pointing out the obvious. Clark's absence was injury-related. The fever had already confirmed it. She wasn't ducking a meeting. She wasn't skipping activism. She simply wasn't physically present. But beyond that, a bigger discussion started to surface, one that made some people uncomfortable. The numbers. Since Clark entered the league, viewership didn't just rise. It surged. National broadcasts featuring her games became appointment television. Networks that once hesitated to prioritize WNBA slots suddenly flexed scheduling. Social media engagement multiplied. Arenas adjusted seating and security logistics when she came to town. Expansion fees reportedly jumped dramatically as investors sensed something new, real commercial traction. That kind of momentum changes negotiating power. When players are asking for a larger share of revenue, it helps when revenue is visibly growing. And whether people like it or not, Clark became the face most directly associated with that growth. That doesn't mean she built the league alone. It doesn't erase the legends who came before her. But timing matters. Cultural moments matter. And sometimes one player becomes the spark that accelerates everything that was already simmering. That reality creates tension. Because veterans who've been pushing for fair compensation for years are now negotiating during the Clark era. The league's economic upswing coincides with her arrival. The spotlight is brighter than ever. And when attention concentrates on one person, it naturally creates shadow elsewhere. It's human. It's emotional. It's complicated. But here's the thing most people missed. Clark never positioned herself above the movement. She didn't reject the message. She didn't criticize the shirts. She didn't undermine the cause. She just didn't participate in a meeting she physically couldn't attend. There's a difference. Still, narratives don't care about nuance. The debate turned into something larger. Was this a generational clash? Were veterans frustrated with the spotlight shifting? Was Clark unintentionally redefining hierarchy in real time? Speculation moved faster than facts. And through all of it, she stayed quiet. That's what made what happened next feel so sharp. Because when she finally did respond, it wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even long. It was 6 words. The post looked harmless. Kelsey Plum uploaded photos from All-Star Weekend. Smiling with teammates, arena lights glowing in the background, the kind of carousel post athletes make after a big event. The caption was simple. Light. Something along the lines of, "What a weekend." Nothing aggressive. Nothing directed at anyone. But in one of those photos, behind Plum, visible but not the focal point, was a massive Nike logo stretched across the arena signage. Now here's why that detail mattered. Plum had switched to Under Armour years earlier. She had her own sneaker deal. Her own branding alignment. That Nike logo in the background wasn't part of her endorsement world. But it was very much part of Caitlin Clark's. Clark had reportedly signed a multi-million-dollar endorsement deal with Nike, one of the largest ever for a women's basketball player. She wasn't just a rookie in the league. She was a flagship marketing asset. And she saw the post. What happened next took less than 10 seconds to type. "Thank you for the Nike ad." That was it. No emoji. No exclamation mark. No direct mention of Plum. Just a dry, surgical observation placed in the comments section where everyone could see it. And that's when the internet truly exploded. Because it wasn't loud. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't even disrespectful. It was clever. The comment did 3 things at once. First, it flipped the power dynamic. Instead of being the subject of criticism, Clark reframed the moment around branding. Her branding. Second, it injected humor. Not mean-spirited humor. Not bitter. Just sharp enough to land. And third, it reminded everyone, subtly, who holds the commercial leverage right now. You can't fake timing like that. She waited through days of headlines. Let analysts debate. Let social media churn. And then, when the conversation had cooled just enough, she placed one perfectly measured response. If you're watching closely, this is where you realize something important about Clark. She understands modern influence. She understands optics. She understands that in 2025, narrative control is as valuable as scoring titles. And if you're enjoying how we're breaking this down layer by layer instead of just reacting emotionally to headlines, this is exactly the kind of analysis we dive into here. So consider subscribing if you want more stories unpacked like this. Because this wasn't just a clapback. It was positioning. And Plum. She didn't respond. No counter-comment. No clarification. Silence. Because any response would have felt defensive. That's the part that made it decisive. Clark didn't win by being louder. She won by being lighter. The fascinating part isn't that Clark responded. It's how she responded. Most athletes, especially rookies under heavy scrutiny, would have either overcorrected or overreacted. They'd post a long caption explaining their side. Maybe a subtle dig. Maybe something emotional that fans could rally behind. Clark did neither. She understood something that takes most public figures years to figure out. When you already have the spotlight, you don't chase the narrative. You redirect it. That 6-word comment didn't insult Plum. It didn't attack the protest. It didn't dismiss the CBA conversation. It simply reframed the moment around branding, which, whether people like it or not, is the engine driving the league's current growth. And that's what made it layered. On the surface, it was playful. Underneath, it was a reminder. Clark isn't just participating in the league's rise. She's central to it. You don't have to diminish veterans to acknowledge that reality. But you also can't ignore it. When expansion fees reportedly jump from around $50 million to $250 million in a short span, investors aren't guessing. They're reacting to momentum. When television ratings double and triple in certain markets, that's not random fluctuation. That's audience pull. Clark didn't say any of that. She didn't have to. The comment let everyone else fill in the blanks. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Plum isn't just a random player. She's accomplished, decorated, a former #1 overall pick, a multiple-time All-Star, a champion, a respected voice in the Players Association. She's put in years of work during seasons where the spotlight was dimmer. She helped build the credibility that allows today's growth to exist. That's real. Which makes this dynamic more complicated than jealous veteran versus rising star. This is about timing. Clark arrived at a moment when the cultural appetite for women's basketball was peaking. Social media amplification was stronger. Corporate sponsorship budgets were shifting. College exposure had primed mainstream audiences. It's not just talent. It's convergence. And when convergence centers around one person, friction naturally follows. The league is in the middle of a generational shift. The old guard didn't fade. They're still elite, still competing, still leading. But now they share the stage with a rookie whose presence alters economics. That's uncomfortable. Not wrong, just uncomfortable. And the All-Star moment pulled that tension into public view. The real question isn't who won the exchange. It's what it revealed. Because behind that Instagram comment was something bigger. A subtle reminder that the balance of influence in the WNBA is changing in real time. About a month later, Kelsey Plum finally addressed it. She appeared on Sue Bird's podcast and called it what she said it was, a bad joke. She explained that she was trying to lighten the mood. That her team nickname had been "hung over," and she was making a playful reference. She admitted it didn't land the way she intended. That's important. Because it shifts the tone from calculated attack to misjudged humor. But here's the thing about public moments. Intent doesn't control impact. By the time Plum clarified, the clip had already circled the internet. Debates had already formed. Comment sections had already split into sides. Think pieces had already been written. You can't rewind that. And Plum knew it. She emphasized unity. She reiterated that all players wore the protest shirts. She refocused the conversation on the CBA negotiations and the larger issue of fair compensation. She made it clear that there was no personal vendetta. It sounded sincere. But the dynamic had already evolved. Because what this entire episode exposed wasn't animosity, it was adjustment. The WNBA is adjusting to a new era. One where growth is no longer theoretical. One where sponsorship deals are bigger, media coverage is heavier, and public scrutiny is sharper. Clark represents that acceleration. Plum represents the foundation. And when acceleration meets foundation, tension is almost inevitable. Not hostility, not hatred, just recalibration. For years, veterans were the face of the league's advocacy. They fought for charter flights. They fought for marketing campaigns. They fought for media visibility. Now those battles are happening in a landscape that looks dramatically different. And that difference is tied, fairly or unfairly, to Clark's arrival. That's why this moment resonated beyond a single press conference line. It felt symbolic. A veteran leader speaking on unity. A rookie star absent due to injury. A comment that implied something. A response that reframed everything. It wasn't explosive. It was subtle. And subtle power shifts are often the most significant ones. What makes this story so compelling isn't the comment itself. It's what it signals about where the league is headed. For nearly 3 decades, the WNBA has battled for mainstream respect. Incredible players came and went. Legends who dominated on the court but rarely broke through into full cultural saturation. The talent was always there. The marketing machine wasn't. Now, suddenly, the machine is humming. National broadcasts feel bigger. Corporate partnerships feel bolder. Arenas feel louder. And casual fans who once ignored the league now have strong opinions about it. That kind of shift doesn't just change revenue. It changes hierarchy. Caitlin Clark entered the league already operating like a cross-platform brand. Her college games at Iowa weren't just sports events, they were media moments. Record-breaking scoring nights. Viral logo threes. Packed arenas on the road. She arrived with an audience that followed her, not just the team. That's rare. And when a player brings her own ecosystem, it forces everyone else to adjust. It doesn't mean she's better than every veteran. It doesn't erase championships or years of hard-earned credibility. But it does mean the business side of the league starts orbiting differently. Sponsors pay attention to audience magnets. Networks pay attention to ratings spikes. Investors pay attention to expansion demand. Clark's presence intersects with all three. So when she typed those 6 words, calm, controlled, almost amused, it wasn't just a comeback. It was a reminder of the leverage she holds without raising her voice. And that's where some of the discomfort lives. Because power that quiet feels harder to challenge. If she had lashed out, critics could dismiss her as emotional. If she had ignored it completely, detractors could frame her as detached. Instead, she threaded the needle, confident without being combative. That's brand awareness. And brand awareness is currency in modern sports. The league now exists in 2 conversations at once. The internal fight for revenue equity and the external explosion of popularity. Clark sits at the center of that intersection. The question isn't whether she meant to redefine the balance. It's whether the league was ready for someone to do it this fast. There's something else people hesitate to say out loud. The WNBA didn't just grow because of Caitlin Clark. But it accelerated because of her. That distinction matters. The foundation was already built by players who fought through seasons with limited coverage and lower salaries. They carried the banner when visibility was scarce. They demanded better conditions long before the spotlight intensified. Clark didn't create that struggle. She stepped into it at a moment when momentum was ready to explode. And that explosion changed the stakes. When television numbers climb dramatically, negotiations feel different. When arenas sell out in cities that previously struggled with attendance, leverage shifts. When corporate sponsors compete for placement, the tone inside boardrooms changes. Clark's name is often attached to those metrics, not because she's solely responsible, but because she's the catalyst audiences rally around. That's not favoritism. That's market behavior. And markets move fast. For veterans like Plum, who earned every accolade the hard way, that speed can feel abrupt. One season you're part of a steady climb. The next, you're sharing space with a rookie whose presence alone triggers record headlines. That doesn't diminish anyone's talent. But it reshapes visibility. And visibility is power. The All-Star Exchange exposed how delicate that transition is. It showed how easily narratives can pivot from collective unity to individual tension. It revealed how quickly a league in transformation can feel divided, even when the players themselves might not be. Because once the cameras lock onto a storyline, it grows legs. And here's the part that makes this era fascinating. Both Clark and Plum are smart enough to understand what's happening. Plum walked back the comment with humility. Clark avoided escalating it. Neither player dragged it into a drawn-out feud. That restraint says more than outrage ever could. It suggests this isn't about animosity. It's about adjustment. The league is evolving. And evolution is rarely smooth. Zoom out for a second. Imagine being a veteran who spent years flying commercial after back-to-back games, negotiating contracts that barely reflect your impact, playing overseas in the off-season just to secure financial stability, and then watching the league suddenly become headline news the moment a rookie arrives. Even if you're supportive, even if you're happy for the growth, there's still a psychological shift. Because attention is a limited resource. For years, the spotlight was shared among a core group of elite players. Champions, MVPs, Olympians. They were the faces of the league's credibility. They carried interviews, advocacy campaigns, sponsorship pitches. Then Clark enters, and media oxygen starts concentrating. National broadcasts lead with her highlights. Debate shows frame segments around her impact. Road arenas promote her arrival weeks in advance. Ticket resale prices spike specifically when she's on the schedule. That kind of gravity changes room dynamics. Again, not maliciously, just naturally. And that's why this moment wasn't really about a joke or an Instagram comment. It was about the subtle tension that comes when hierarchy shifts faster than comfort allows. Clark didn't ask for that spotlight. But she didn't shrink from it either. She leaned into it, not with arrogance, but with awareness. She shows up prepared. She speaks carefully. She rarely fuels controversy directly. She lets performance and timing do most of the talking. That's rare for someone in their first professional season. It suggests something beyond talent. It suggests media instinct. And that instinct is powerful in a league where narrative momentum now shapes financial outcomes. Because here's the reality no one can ignore. The upcoming collective bargaining negotiations will be influenced by the league's current visibility. The stronger the ratings, the bigger the sponsorship deals, the more investor confidence, the stronger the player's negotiating position. Clark's presence contributes to that leverage, which makes public friction counterproductive. If the league appears divided, it weakens the message. If the players appear unified, it strengthens it. That's why Plum clarified. That's why Clark kept it light. Both understand the bigger picture. This isn't about winning a comment section. It's about protecting the moment. Now imagine being Caitlin Clark in the middle of all this. You're a rookie. You haven't played a full professional season yet. You're adjusting to stronger defenders, tighter travel schedules, relentless media attention, and expectations that most players don't face until years into their careers. And at the same time, you're being framed as the economic engine of an entire league. That's not normal pressure. That's generational pressure. Every missed shot becomes a debate topic. Every hard foul becomes a headline. Every quote gets dissected for hidden meaning. Fans who love you defend you aggressively. Critics who doubt you analyze you aggressively. You're not just playing basketball. You're navigating a cultural moment. Clark could have easily responded emotionally during the All-Star controversy. She could have posted something longer. Something defensive. Something clarifying her injury status and reaffirming her support for player unity. Instead, she waited. That patience signals confidence. Because when you know your value, you don't rush to prove it. And that's what makes her 6-word response feel so controlled. It wasn't reactive. It was deliberate. She let the league process the moment first. She let fans debate. She let analysts talk. And only after the tension cooled did she drop a comment that reframed the entire narrative. That's composure beyond her years. It's easy to forget she's still early in her professional journey. She carries herself like someone who understands long-term positioning. Someone who knows today's reaction becomes tomorrow's reputation. That kind of awareness protects longevity. And longevity is what defines eras. The WNBA isn't just adding a popular rookie. It's entering a period where influence spreads faster than ever before. Social media accelerates everything. Brand deals amplify everything. Rivalries intensify instantly. Clark sits at the center of that acceleration. Whether she wants to or not. The question now isn't whether she can handle the spotlight. It's how the league will adapt to someone who controls it so naturally. Here's where this becomes bigger than two players. The WNBA is negotiating its future in real time. The collective bargaining agreement isn't just paperwork. It determines revenue share, travel standards, marketing budgets, long-term sustainability. It defines how much players truly benefit from the growth they're helping generate. And growth is finally undeniable. Television contracts are being reevaluated. Expansion conversations feel serious. Corporate sponsors are circling with real investment. The league isn't surviving anymore. It's scaling. But scaling comes with pressure. When revenue rises, expectations rise. When attention multiplies, scrutiny multiplies. Every public moment gets magnified. Every disagreement feels symbolic. That's why the All-Star Exchange resonated so deeply. It wasn't about a meeting attendance list. It was about optics during a pivotal negotiation period. Unity strengthens bargaining power. Division weakens it. Even perceived division can become leverage for the other side. That's the delicate balance players are walking right now. They're advocating for fair compensation while also navigating an era where individual stardom can overshadow collective messaging. Clark's presence amplifies everything. When she scores, ratings spike. When she's fouled hard, debates trend nationally. When she comments 6 words, headlines follow. That kind of amplification is powerful, but it also means every movement has ripple effects. The league is learning how to manage that scale. Veterans are adjusting to new levels of visibility. Rookies are stepping into historic expectations. Front offices are recalibrating marketing strategies. And through all of it, the public is watching more closely than ever before. That's the real story. Not a feud. Not a grudge. An evolution. Now comes the part everyone secretly waits for. The matchups. Because whether the players admit it or not, fans circle dates. When the Indiana Fever face the Los Angeles Sparks, viewership bumps. Social feeds light up. Every possession between Clark and Plum feels slightly charged, even if both players treat it professionally. That's how rivalries begin. Not always through hostility, through narrative. Think about the greatest rivalries in basketball history. They didn't always start with trash talk. Sometimes they started with tension, with generational overlap, with a sense that the league was shifting and 2 players symbolized different eras colliding. Clark represents acceleration. Plum represents establishment. When those identities share the court, fans project meaning onto every interaction. A hard closeout becomes a statement. A deep 3 feels intentional. A no-look assist becomes proof of something larger. Even if it's just basketball. That's the power of storyline. And storylines are oxygen in modern sports. Networks lean into them. Commentators reference them. Social media clips isolate moments and replay them endlessly. It doesn't require animosity, only contrast. And contrast exists here. One player entering her prime visibility window. Another defending her place in a league she helped legitimize. Neither villain. Neither hero. Just competitors in a league evolving faster than ever. If handled correctly, this dynamic could elevate both of them. Rivalries sharpen edges. They force growth. They create iconic moments that define eras. But if mismanaged, it could fracture unity at the worst possible time. That's why the restraint we've seen matters. Clark hasn't escalated. Plum hasn't retaliated. Both seem aware that the bigger picture outweighs personal pride. Still, the tension lingers, not as conflict, but as anticipation. And anticipation drives engagement. If you study basketball history, you'll notice something. The league-defining rivalries rarely begin with chaos. They begin with discomfort. When Magic Johnson and Larry Bird entered the NBA, veterans didn't immediately celebrate the shift. The spotlight tilted. Marketing changed. The narrative centered around a new duo that symbolized a new era. It wasn't personal. It was structural. When Michael Jordan rose, the league adjusted around him. Some embraced it. Others resisted. But the ecosystem eventually recalibrated. When LeBron arrived straight out of high school with impossible expectations, the attention was overwhelming. Every move dissected. Every comment amplified. Veterans watched as the marketing engine pivoted toward youth and future potential. That's what generational inflection points look like. Clark's arrival carries a similar feeling, not in identical scale, but in structural impact. The WNBA has always had elite talent, but now it has a player whose brand transcends the sport's traditional audience. That changes broadcast strategy. It changes sponsor conversations. It changes how matchups are promoted. And when structural change happens quickly, adjustment periods follow. The All-Star moment was one of those adjustment flashes. A veteran speaking candidly. A rookie responding strategically. The internet amplifying it all. But what separates fleeting drama from era-defining shifts is how the participants handle the aftermath. So far, both players have avoided escalation. Plum clarified and redirected focus to collective bargaining. Clark delivered a single precise response and moved on. That maturity matters. Because if this turns into a rivalry built on respect and competition, it could elevate the league even further. Fans love tension. They love contrast. They love feeling like something bigger is unfolding. But if it devolves into division, it risks undermining the unity needed during one of the most important negotiation periods in league history. The path forward is delicate. And everyone knows it. At the center of all of this is a simple reality. The WNBA is stepping into a new era. An era where attention is louder, money is bigger, and narratives move faster than ever before. Caitlin Clark didn't create women's basketball. She didn't build the foundation. But she arrived at the exact moment when the league was ready to explode, and she became the spark that accelerated it. Kelsey Plum didn't block progress. She didn't attack the movement. She made a comment that landed wrong in a moment when optics mattered most. And Clark responded in a way that revealed something bigger than a rivalry. She revealed control. Control of timing. Control of tone. Control of brand. That's the kind of influence that reshapes leagues. Not through shouting. Through positioning. 6 words reminded everyone that modern dominance isn't just measured in points per game. It's measured in leverage. In audience pull. In knowing when to stay silent and when to speak lightly but decisively. The WNBA now stands at a crossroads where growth and unity have to coexist. Veterans deserve respect for carrying the league through leaner years. New stars deserve space to elevate it into something larger. The smartest path forward isn't division. It's alignment. If Clark continues to handle pressure with composure, and if veterans channel frustration into collective progress rather than personal tension, this era could redefine women's professional basketball for decades. And the real story may not be who won an Instagram exchange. It may be how the league adapted to a player who understood the modern sports landscape faster than anyone expected. The spotlight isn't fading. It's intensifying. The only question left is who rises with it. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just about headlines. It's about understanding how power shifts in real time. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you see this becoming a defining rivalry, or was it just a moment blown out of proportion? And if you want more deep breakdowns like this, not surface drama, but the strategy behind it, make sure you like the video and subscribe. Because this league is changing fast, and we're going to keep unpacking every move that shapes its future.